Hello, Shaun.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome. So, for people watching, this is my friend and soul brother, Shaun. And today I will be interviewing him about his spiritual awakening, his very vivid, sometimes lucid dreaming, and possibly even Star Trek. I'm wearing my Captain Picard shirt because that is a bonding point that we have that we just really, really love. Star Trek The Next Generation. It's very close to our hearts. And I think we might even have the same favorite episode. I'm going to ask you what your favorite episode is later.
Mm.
And I think it's the same one, if I remember correctly. So let's get into you. When did you begin your awakening journey, your expansion of consciousness? You can go as far back as you would like to, whatever feels relevant. And how did that unfold for you?
Well, really, there were kind of three phases over the course of my life. There was my childhood, which had some strange events, including dreams that I still remember to this day. You know, um, I'm I just turned 40 not too long ago, and I review, certain events in my life, uh, and I think, wait, if I still remember that dream over 30 years later, it probably has some very important significance. So there's that. And then there's kind of another phase with my teenage years where I got into the books of Dr. Uh, David R. Hawkins. He wrote the book Power versus Force. He's probably most well known for his map of consciousness. Um, and then more recently, in the past couple of years, it kind of uh, hit the gas pedal with the dreaming, telepathy, communications with extraterrestrials, all this paranormal stuff, which I should mention to folks my profession. I'm a clinical laboratory scientist. I have a background in science, specifically in biology. So I'm an analytical thinker. So uh, I know a lot of people kind of talk about woo woo stuff online. And for me, I'm always looking at it from a scientific point of view. And a lot of this stuff, I know unless people have had their own experiences similar that they can relate to, they're not going to understand a lot of what I have to say. Because uh, unless you have some experience yourself, people are going to be like, oh, that's just crazy talk, or oh, that's just a dream. I can tell you a lot of these dreams are not just dreams. If
Yeah.
you've had a significant dream that wait, that wasn't normal, you can't dismiss certain things after a while. Um, so, did you want me to start with um, from the beginning during my childhood, or just kind of more the recent stuff? Or
Anything. Start at the beginning. I'd love to hear what happened in your childhood that you remember that feels significant in your journey.
the
What do you remember?
well, I'll start with the dream. Um, I had a lot of nightmares as a child. I had a lot of fear. I would have panic attacks just from starting a conversation. Um, my mother, she didn't believe me, but I told her I will have my heart race just by hearing the dial tone on a phone. And she's like, "What?" And I said, "Feel my pulse." And she she was also in the medical field, so she could easily find my pulse. I'm like, "Okay." And I picked up the phone. I hear the ding, and my pulse goes, and
Wow.
it's racing and I'm like huffing and puffing, having a panic attack. And she's like, "Why are you so scared?" And I said, "I don't know." And um, certain things like that. Why was there such a strong fear? It only started to make sense in the past few years when I started dream journaling and realizing all the horrific nightmares and stuff that's happened um, on the astral realm, my past lives. And then there were some QHHT sessions we had, past life as a slave, abuse, trauma, all sorts of negative things. So, but I did say I was going to start with a dream. And I remember this one dream as a child. I was walking out into the backyard, uh, and there was this bird. It looked like a hummingbird, and it was just zooming like a drone straight for my head. No matter where I ran off to, it was just aiming straight for my head. And in the dream, it felt like my mother had come out of the house to protect me, though she looked more angelic and had all these white, flowy robes. She grabbed
Hmm.
me, held out her hands, and the bird just kept stabbing her hand, and she was bleeding profusely. But that, no matter where I moved my head, the bird kept trying to go straight for my head. uh, and the way it felt mechanical makes me think, in hindsight nowadays, that there was some sort of technological device that can uh, be directed at people subconscious, and we can only be aware of it within the dream. And one of my spirit guides was trying to protect me as a child, but she could only do that for a certain period of time because she was taking damage. It's not like she's immune to the whatever attack it was. And uh, we've had sessions where I know I've mentioned the morning of my first QHHT session with you. I had this profound dream of extraterrestrials removing this um, energetic implant that I was seeing as a spider. We can go into that later.
Yeah.
But that kind of stands out from my childhood. And that kind of alerted me that, most children don't have this level of fear. There's something beneath the surface, but, when you're like 6, what are you supposed to do about it? I would just have
Yeah.
nightmares. Um, and then now I think about it, there wasn't a hallucination I had. We had this um, portrait of an owl. One of my, I think my great aunt, she was an artist. And um, in my research of UFOlogy, I've heard a lot of cases where people have dreams of owls and they find out that's representative of grays. And so I saw this picture of an owl one morning, and it caught my eye this morning because the light was on it, and normally we have the light off. And I was just staring at it, and all of a sudden, I swear the thing just jumped straight out at me. I felt something hit me in the head, and I was completely in a panic. And I ran straight back to my room, hid under the covers, and was shaking for hours. And at some point, I fell back to sleep. I woke up in the morning, and I was like, "What was that? Did that actually happen? Was that a dream?" It's been so long. I don't know what part I was awake and what part I was asleep, but I've never had a hallucination that vivid. I think I was awake,
Hmm.
but it's hard to
It was
tell.
physical.
It felt physical, but
Hmm.
some of these dreams are so vivid, it's hard to tell between waking state and asleep. There's been some mornings where the dream was so vivid, I wake up thinking, "Oh, this isn't real. I feel like I'm asleep," and I'm waiting to wake up, and then I don't. I'm like, "Oh, I guess this is real life."
Wow. That is vivid.
Yeah, that particular time only happened once, but after that, I kind of stopped believing in this reality being real, and I just feel like I'm stuck in this state of consciousness that somebody's kind of anchored me into. But I
Yeah.
know this reality isn't real.
So you were having those types of dreams and experiences when you were younger. Did that also stretch into your teen years?
I should say that the the number of dreams that I remember greatly increased in the last couple years, but uh, there there is one dream I remember as a teenager that stood out. It's kind of disturbing, so I don't know if you really want me to get into it, but it it involved like this flesh sex demon that was like inside me, and it was like it was just this mound of flesh with gnarly teeth, and it was just drooling, and it was like cravenous. At the time, I figured, oh, I'm going through puberty. It's just symbolic of raging hormones or something. But in hindsight of uh, these more recent dreams and research into like energetic attachments, I reevaluate that and I look through it a different lens, and I think maybe it wasn't just a dream. I mean, I am remembering it 20 plus years later, you know. So the
Yeah.
few dreams I do remember from my childhood before I started dream journaling, I figure if it made that big of an impact on me, there's probably a reason why. Like my higher self is like, no, you need to remember this. This
Yes.
is a critical piece of the puzzle.
And now, can you talk a little bit about the practice that you have developed of dream journaling? How has the dream journaling helped you, and what is your practice? I'm curious.
So, if I may kind of talk about how I got into it, um,
Yeah.
it started one day. I'm always on my computer. A YouTube clip came up. It was a Joe Rogan clip. I don't remember who the guest was, but I clicked on it for whatever reason, and the guest was talking about Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and he said, "Joe, you need to watch this." And the way he said it, for whatever reason, I felt like he wasn't talking to Joe. I felt like he was talking to me. And
Oh,
I've always kind of had this interest in extraterrestrials. Um, are you familiar with the term wanderer, as I
yes.
mentioned in the raw material law one? Okay.
Yes.
So if you look at all the things that distinguish a person as being a wanderer, I check them all.
All of your boxes get checked. I mean, when you said that, I just, sorry to interrupt. I actually felt your crown open wide energetically when you said the word wanderer. Like when you plugged into that, there's a lot of meaning and encodement behind that word.
Well, over the course of my life, by far, the most common dream I have is being back in grade school. Now, when I was in grade school, I didn't think anything of it. I was just, oh, I'm dreaming of my day. And then I got into high school. I'm still dreaming about grade school. I'm like, well, they were the formative years of my life. Most of my life was there. So, it makes sense. Then I got into college and I'm still dreaming of grade school. I'm like, okay, it's pretty far removed right now. Why am I not dreaming of high school? I'm always dreaming of
Hmm.
grade school. And
Yeah.
then I graduated college and I'm still dreaming of grade school. Then I started working as a dental assistant for 5 years. I'm still dreaming of grade school. Then, I started my current path and I'm still dreaming of grade school. I'm like, why is my mind so obsessed with grade school? The overarching theme is, for whatever reason, I have to keep going back to school, even though I already graduated and I'm an adult and I'm an alumni. I'm going back to school, aka, for people who don't know, a wanderer is a soul that's already graduated from third density life, human life is normal, and they've come from higher densities of consciousness, fourth, fifth, sixth density. My dream suggests that I come from a sixth density collective, and I've come back into third density um, as a Lightbringer to help clean up the garbage that's in the astral realm so that people have a chance to grow and flourish themselves, because a lot of people don't realize these energetic entities, um, they can attach to people and really mess up their lives, as it's greatly affected mine.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I got a little off on a tangent. I
I,
wanted to know about my
excuse me.
dream
I'm
journaling.
loving your tangent because you just defined what a wanderer is, and it completely resonates with me that that's what you are. And I remember having a conversation about this a long time ago, and I had heard the term wanderer defined by from a couple of different sources, Ra being one. Yeah, you are the poster man for what a wanderer is, and I know that that's you, and I feel strongly that's what you are doing.
Well,
You're
if people are
cleaning up
curious
the
about it,
astral.
there is a wanderer test. I forgot the name of the author, but you can find it online. I was always interested in space when I was a kid. I had a placemat with the solar system and data on all the planets, and um, even though I was a kid, I was interested in astronomy magazine and all the check marks for what a wanderer is. I'm the quintessential example, with the one exception of I don't feel like I'm homesick or I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And I think that's because most wanderers came in after the 50s, after the A bomb. Dolores Cannon talks about it in her books, Three Waves of Wanderers. Uh,
Mm.
and in my case, I feel like I've been here since before Atlantean times. I've had dreams of Atlantis. It was real. Um,
Yeah,
and to me, it's a memory. Uh, so I hear
I
mainstream,
resonate with that.
I,
I
I,
have
I
memories
see
as well.
mainstream archaeology and all the cover ups on history, and they think, oh, yeah, there's no civilization. I'm like, no, it's a memory. It's like, you guys are silly.
Yeah, just because we just because our science hasn't caught up with consciousness doesn't mean that
It's been
it's not
actively
there.
suppressed.
Yes, it has. Gosh, we could have a
I've heard
whole
so
episode on
many
that.
stories of people finding information about it, and then uh, for whatever reason, powers that be, they feel threatened by it, and they want to destroy the data. There's always been this long-standing war over knowledge, because knowledge is
Yeah.
power. If people knew the truth, then they're more able to self-empower themselves, and that makes it harder for the powers that be to control them. So they lose power as we gain sovereignty.
Well, they can only suppress it for so long.
I like to believe so, but
Yeah.
as I study history, I just see cycles repeating itself. But everybody keeps saying that there's supposed to be some big events to kind of end the age. So
We're
I'll believe it
looking at
when
a
I see it. I'll believe it when I see
26,000 year cycle, ending and a new beginning of that now too. It's prehistory that we're cycling back to, so we don't remember collectively in our conscious collective. I mean, the part of us that is our conscious mind in the egoic, we'll say collective. We don't necessarily have history 26,000 years before, but it's in the collective subconscious. And that's why channelers and people who are moving into their multidimensional consciousness are remembering it's there. We're cycling back to it, and that'll bring us into a higher vibration. It is the higher vibration that's allowing us to even tap into that. And now I've tangented. Okay, let me bring you back to
the dream journaling. I still
yes.
didn't answer that question. Sorry.
Oh,
Um,
no, 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 no worries. I have them down here. I mean, I've got a little map to where we're going. You and
we'll
I,
kind of
we could
anchor us
tangent for
back.
hours.
That's good. That's good. So I was watching the Joe Rogan clip, and it said, "Watch Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind." I saw that, and if anybody hasn't seen it, I do highly recommend it, because a lot of people, they say, "Where's the pictures? I want video evidence. I want
Yeah,
pictures of extraterrestrials." Well, you can see their energy bodies in these in that documentary. They use special camera equipment to capture it. At that point, you either believe it or you don't. The
yeah,
scientist in me is like, okay, they pose a hypothesis. If it's true, it should be repeatable. Now, I didn't really want to invest in the camera equipment, but I knew they're telepathic. So I said, okay, if they're telepathic, let's see if they can hear me.
oh,
So, um, oh, I should mention, like, I was really enthralled by the documentary, and right at the end, they had a link to a website. It's at officialfirstcontact.com. I thought it was going to have more information about the documentary. It's actually completely different. And if you type it in, the first thing I saw, I don't know if I haven't been on a web page in a while, but when I went there, first thing I see is all these paintings by this one telepath called Sue Walker, of these group of grays. And um, they call themselves the Ponti, and supposedly they have a base in the mountains, in the Sandia Mountains in New Mexico. And because Sue is so telepathic, she's able to see it visually and draw them. And she I don't know if she still has a Twitter account, but she at the time she still when I was getting into it, she did. And uh, she would post messages that they would have. She was kind of the translator, the intermediary. And they said that they're here with the Federation to try to facilitate a smooth first contact. And one of the things they are doing to help that is they are encouraging people to develop their telepathy. So they developed a telepathy primer. Basically, it's a PDF that kind of walks you through to ask yourself, what kind of learner are you? Are you a visual learner? Are you more audio, uh, uh, kinesiological, like touch, that sort of thing? And after reading it, I'm like, well, I'm definitely visual. Um, and maybe with like a little bit of the touch, because I've always been an athlete and I like, to move and work with my hands. So uh, I they say if you want to have contact, uh, practice 15 to 30 minutes a day for 100 days and then try pinging us, because people need to kind of develop their um, exercise that muscle, so to speak, and then
Mhm.
maybe they can hear you. Well, in my case, that it wasn't 100 days; it was instant. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, I'm
what did you
now.
get?
That's another hint that I'm a wanderer because I come from worlds where telepathy is the default. Now, I didn't realize at the time it was instant because to me, it was all like, oh, I'm just imagining it. It's just my imagination. That's how it feels at first. Um, it wasn't until about a month later where I had an unquestionably very telepathic dream. And I have physical symptoms afterwards. Like I just went through finals week. My brain felt drained after sleeping for 8 hours. And then I would,
Wow.
after sleeping 8 hours, and normally I only sleep 7, I was up for a couple hours. I'm like, I need to eat something. I eat something. 2 hours later, I have to go back to bed. And I sleep for another 2 hours. I wake up. I'm like, man, I'm just so tired. And then I eat a little bit more. 2 hours later, I have to go back to sleep. I slept 12 hours that
You're
day.
doing heavy work, heavy
And
work.
when you have, I mean, grays are no joke. They're very telepathic. So uh, when you stress test your systems, um, and I have a feeling they were holding back, but there, I got this sense there was a certain urgency to really get that implant off of me. Uh,
Mhm.
but it was clear after that dream that it was unquestionably telepathic. And I reviewed back in my journal. Maybe they were kind of pinging me to leave a suggestion. It's like, hey, were there any hints prior? And I checked my journal. Uh, the very first night, I had a short dream. I was at work and we got a dispatch call. Now I work in the lab. We don't get dispatch calls, but uh, all of us in the lab, we started running down the hall um, to be sent out, meaning they heard my ping and they're sending a dispatch team. And it came out a month later.
Wow. Um, can you describe what a telepathic dream is like? What does that feel like? And how is it maybe
Um,
different than a different dream or another kind of dream?
well, there's different intensity levels. Um, Sometimes it'll just feel like a dream. Most people that have it, they'll just be like, oh, that was just kind of a dream. Maybe they'll have a bit of a headache or brain fog in the morning. Most of the telepathic dreams are going to be from their spirit guides. Um, in my case, since I was reaching out to extraterrestrials, that's what I got. Um,
Okay.
so your spirit guides, they will often use very compressed data, so to speak, to minimize the bandwidth and strain on you. So there'll be a lot of symbolism where, they send a symbolic image rather than a direct image. And then there may be 7 different ways you can interpret it, all have valuable meaning. So
Okay.
with that compressed data, where it could be weird and esoteric and symbolic, uh, you can get a lot more message across without having much strain. Uh, I'm not sure if every dream is telepathic. Um, I will say that my parents are very frequently in my dreams. And
Hmm.
when I wake up, I'm like, I felt like they were my parents, but they didn't look like my parents. So I think,
Okay.
and sometimes I get lucid in these dreams and I'm like, wait a minute. It's like they have this hologram screen. And then I'm like, I want to see past it. And then I see through the screen. And then I see like a mantis or a gray or a tall white. And often they panic and there's some guy in the background that hits button on a console and I'm abruptly thrown out of the dream.
He's on to us.
Right. The secrecy apparently applies to them as well. Like for whatever reason, we are not allowed to know. Um,
That agreed upon veil. Yeah.
I don't know if like to me it's a bit frustrating because it's like, hey, it's my dream. Why do you guys get to dictate, when I
Yeah.
wake up or not? I'm trying to figure out the truth. I'm trying to answer these questions, but man, they really panic when I see through them. But
Shaun, this is resonating so much. If I can just interject. So now I'm starting to see that one of the big dreams that I had that has always been kind of mysterious to me was probably a telepathic dream. I just didn't frame it that way. But in one of my dreams, someone, I'll just say, dressed up as my dad, who looked like my dad, but here was the thing that was off. His eyes were golden. They were literally glowing. And in the dream, I guess they couldn't cover that, the glowing golden eyes. But I had been dealing with a lot of fear. And in this certain type of dream, I would feel like an entity was coming in to take over my body, and then I would fight with it and I would lose, and it would take me over and I would wake up. Well, I'm going to call it a guide now, but my dad, guide, right as this was starting to happen in the dream, he made me turn toward him and he got really close to my face and he said, try hugging it.
mm,
Like instead of running away from it, try hugging it. And it was so strange because he said that, and immediately here is this thing coming in. And I still had that vibration of what he had told me to do. And so was like in between this like crazy fear panic response and the guidance from my guide. And so I did the weirdest thing. Like I literally just like opened my arms and I was like, come here, like let's have a hug. And it was a very confusing, it felt like there was a confusing vortex of energy there, that this love energy mixing in with this fear and panic, primal energy sort of clashed. And it was just like everything deflated all at once. It just was over. And I woke up and I never had to deal with that again. I never ever had to deal with that intense panic. Like I thought I was being taken over by a dark entity or something. That's what it felt like. It just was gone. And I just remember the glowing golden eyes of a face that looked like my dad. And so what you're saying is that's probably a telepathic dream with my guide. That
Probably.
makes a lot more sense to me now than my dad just looked really weird and was that his spirit or something. I mean, that really resonates. So thank you.
Uh, well, our spirit guides, um, they seem to have a lot of difficulty with communication. It's like we're so dense down here and they're so far removed, it's hard to get stuff through. That was a repeat current theme in Dolores Cannon's books. Like when
Hmm.
she would get people into that altered state of consciousness and bring the higher self forward, they would a lot of them would reprimand the person because they weren't listening. And
Right. I got that a lot too in the sessions. It's like the higher self comes in and it's a lot of times it's almost like this, oy vey, you're finally listening. Okay, let me give a lot of information really quick while you're here in this like calm, receptive state because we can't get through to you.
right.
That was very
So
common.
uh, they will probably use every opportunity when people dream as possible in order to try to get messages through. And they will repeat messages if they're important over and over again until you kind of finally get it. And then when you finally do get it, then they move on to the next one. Like
Yeah.
I mentioned about the dreams of grade school, those don't occur much at all anymore, even though they were pretty consistent for 30 years. And because I finally got it, I'm like, why does this keep happening? And then I finally figured
What
out,
was it that you finally got? What do you think that was?
I read the raw material, learned about the concept of a wanderer, and I'm like, then I started doing like a live review, and I'm like, wait, am I a wanderer? And I think that was one of the questions I wrote down before our first QHHT session. That was
Mhm.
one of the advice tips you gave. Write down your list of questions, and I think over the course of years, all of the questions have been answered. Even the stuff about 9/11, I was
Yay.
like, I was just throwing it out there. It's like, you know, uh, not really expecting an answer, but yeah. So if people have questions, just write them down and if say, hey, I want some help, and your guides will probably be there to help you. And uh, I probably should talk about you know the dream journaling and how to actually remember stuff. So uh, I had those telepathic events, and one of the things I said in the telepathy primer was keep a dream journal. So I'm like, okay. Um, and so I just have a notebook. That's the one I'm working on right now. I have about seven others that I filled up, all of them about 100 pages each. So I
Wow.
probably have close to 1,000 pages of dream journalings for the past couple of years. Um, and use a pencil because when you're scribbling, groggy in the dark in the middle of the night, if you're using a pen and that thing's dry, you're not writing anything. So use a pen. I have one page which is just for quick one word, one phrase, short things to jog my memory when I wake up to write a full entry of what I can recall. So I think all of us remember our dreams for a brief window, but because we don't write it or make a conscientious effort to remember them because we don't think they're significant, which they are, they're very significant. But we've been trained by society to dismiss our dreams. Oh, it's just a dream. Oh, it doesn't mean anything. No, they all mean something. I think that's the most important thing to get across. Every single dream means something. Our job is to learn how to learn that language and how to translate it properly. And I don't understand most of them even after all these years, but I don't stress about it anymore because uh, there'll be a repeat dream. They'll keep repeating it until you get the message. They may present it slightly different ways, uh, but they will use repetition if something's important until you finally get it. And um, so as long as you have kind of that trigger word to kind of unlock the memory, it's in there, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, there was a bakery, or oh yeah, there was this cat, and um, most of us have probably had a day where we're like, oh yeah, I didn't dream anything last night, and then they go about their day and they see an object, and it's like, oh wait a minute, I did have a dream last night.
That
It's
happens to me all the time. Yeah,
it's the same thing. You just need something to kind of
to like
remind
jog.
you, right? And that's all I do. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't remember my dreams either. But so that's why I don't feel like I'm doing anything particularly special or important. But as I do a lot of research and I read a lot of books, um, the only other person I've really found that has a lot of significant dreams that talks about it in a public format is David Wilcock. Um,
Yeah.
Gordon Scallion wrote a couple books, and he had some pretty vivid dreams. And there is some weird synchronicity where um, oftentimes my spirit guides, they'll give me a dream and they know I'm not going to get what the point of the dream was by itself. So later that day, there will be some other event completely unrelated to me that comes in and they form the picture. So
Wow.
to give an example, um, well, maybe I'll give an older example because a recent example is a little disturbing. Um, so actually, now that I think about it, they're both kind of disturbing.
Oh,
Um,
just let it rip. It's okay.
so uh, with there's this one dream where um, it's I'll just say it. Um, I was making love to somebody that had the lower half of a horse, and I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do?
Centaur?
And
Centaur?
uh, I don't know. All I saw was the lower half,
Oh.
and and I was like, man, do I have like these repressed feelings that I'm like
Am
psychoanalyzing?
I a centaur?
I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't talk about it, but it it has a connection to Gordon Michael Scallion. I have a stack of books and Notes from the Cosmos he wrote. I knew about the book for years. My mom read it, and I never had an interest in it, until more recently. Um, and for whatever reason, my computer this morning and needed to do an update, so I had to wait for like 10 minutes. So I'm just kind of standing here waiting, and I see his book on top, and I'm like, now let me flip through it. Go through the table of contents. My eyes immediately go to chapter where it says uh, Atlantean Dream, and I'm like, oh,
Oh.
well, I'm interested in dreams, and I read the chapter. He talks about how he had this very vivid dream. He was a slave trader, and he was, and there were these human animal hybrids, and a lot of them were being killed because they were. I mean, it was a slave trade. A lot of them died in transport, and it related to him because he was having asthma and he had trouble breathing. And until he undid that karma, he always had breathing problems. And after that dream, he no longer had the breathing problems. And
Hmm.
so I have that weird dream about making love to somebody with a lower half of a horse, and then read this, and I'm like, okay, that's just weird. That like I
Yeah.
that was the book on top, and
That
my
was for
computer,
you.
right, things were lining up. So that kind of tells me my spirit guides that like they can coordinate things in the dream life and then in waking life. Um, and it makes me really kind of feel like I'm not a participant. I'm just an actor going through the motions on the stage. That's why I say this isn't real. We're just kind of like sort of puppets on the stage, and we most of us aren't aware of the string that is pulling us in a particular
Yeah.
direction. Um,
Yeah.
but that sort of stuff happens all the time.
Synchronicities weaving from the dream world into this reality. I resonate with that, Shaun, a lot. And sometimes I don't even recall a dream until I'm speaking with someone, or I'll be speaking light language and I'll be like, oh, there was a big dream that I'm now connecting to this reality. Which brings me to my next question. You may be, well, this is a statement. You may be one of those people who really can bring, we'll just say, like interdimensional astral information into this matrix, we'll call it, and anchor it in. What I feel that you're doing, and this maybe you'll resonate, maybe not, but I've recently been doing a thing called light grounding, and I know that you have a very high light. Just through our quantum interactions, I've tapped into your very high angelic self, which is anchored. It's anchored here, like in your human self. So, light grounding is a practice where you either write or you do something with your hands to bring that light or that inspiration or that multidimensional consciousness here. My sons do it through art, and they're both really tuned into each other. They're these like really different Aquarius twin children that like they are like bringing other dimensional information in through their art. I feel like maybe a person like you who can develop this journaling practice after you dream and really like I think you're light grounding that knowledge, that information, or at least the cosmic energetic data. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you at the moment in your human brain, but there is something really important about you light grounding that through your writing and whatever other ways you have of doing that. Maybe you're gardening, as you're out there and your crown is open and you're kind of channeling your light in. That's just a thought that I had while you were talking about that. And then also, I felt my guides being like, Erin, hello, why aren't you getting up and writing your keywords? Like, take some advice from Shaun. You need to start journaling and light grounding some of what we're giving you in dream time. So I'm sorry, that wasn't a question. It was just ramblings and things that are coming in to my consciousness as you're talking.
As you were saying that, there was a you had a question about how do you know it's a telepathic dream. Uh,
Yeah.
with telepathy, there's very active pressure over the third eye. Um, Sometimes I felt it as like there's like a balloon inside my head and it's being inflated. Sometimes it feels like a washcloth over my head. It depends on the source. Um, and uh, I suspect I've been watched over by extraterrestrials for a number of years because I mentioned the Ponti before, and uh, I was reaching out to them just to confirm: are they real? Is this real? And um, one thing that stood out to me was the sensation was like an inflated balloon kind of being smushed by it as I'm laying in bed, and I'm like, I've had this feeling before as a teenager,
Hmm.
and I couldn't make sense of it at the time. Uh, and I'm like, wait a minute, this feels the exact same as back then. So I think I don't know where I heard this from, but maybe it was David Wilcock or one of the other people that have had you know extraterrestrials kind of follow them throughout life. I think a lot of wanderers, they have a group of extraterrestrials that watch over them over the entire course of their lives, um, whether they're helping them with health related issues. And I do think that there have been, um, how to word it, um, well, like I rarely get sick. In my adult life, I've only gotten sick once, and that was a couple months ago when I came down with COVID. Uh, but other than that, my entire adult life, uh, I've never been sick other than that one time. So past 20 years, I've been sick once. So uh, that's pretty unusual,
That is so unusual. Yeah.
especially since when I was a kid, I'd get sick every year. I'd get the flu, but I went to college. I took public transit. People would be coughing and hacking next to me. I never got sick. Didn't take the flu
That's
shot
incredible.
for many of those years. Still never got sick. The rest of my family is all sick in the house. I didn't get sick. Um, so, maybe they're helping me on some level. Maybe I just have a stronger immune system. Um, but uh, one of the things that came through a QHHT session, this isn't exactly a question you asked, but I feel it's important to mention.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, so there was a lot of prep work for just me to incarnate. Um, my mother is not a typical person. She's much more spiritual than most. So you can imagine energetically what kind of womb that creates for the fetus when you have somebody that is a higher vibration. It can
Yeah.
facilitate somebody with a higher vibration to come in and get more of them into the body, as opposed to somebody with a low vibration. They just can't channel that energy. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's an interesting thought, but how do I really know that's the case? And then is like a thought chimed in, well, look at your sister. I was like, what do you mean? She didn't move at all when she was in the womb. And they had to recast her entire left side because it was all bent because she'd never moved. I was like, well, what does that have to do with it? She's not used to the energy. So when she was in the amniotic fluid, to her, it was like a scalding sensation. It was too much. So to minimize the burning sensation, she never moved. Because if you're like in hot water,
Wow.
when you move, it feels worse. So she didn't move. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting idea, but um, like I can't prove that, but it kind of makes sense. Uh, and it would also explain, assuming that I have a higher vibration than most, the telepathic suggestions that I'm a light bringer or a light conduit. That's the words that came in. I think you use phrases like anchoring light in. And there have been a number of dreams to suggest that there's these different levels of beings, but we think, oh, higher is better. Not necessarily, because uh, sometimes the best teacher is a recent graduate for a student. I had this experience at work. I just graduated the clinical laboratory science program. And so I was really able to teach the new students a lot of the pitfalls that I went through because I just went through the program. So it was all fresh in my memory. Now, somebody who had been a scientist for 20 years, they don't know. They're so out of touch with the academic side that they can't relate. They can't really help. So higher is not necessarily better for where a particular person's at their point in time. Sometimes somebody just above you is the best teacher.
It's like a bridge. It's
Right.
a relatable
So
bridge. Yeah.
in the dreams, oftentimes there'll be a sister figure. And so rather than the parents teaching, there'll be the sister figure that will translate. And one of the little breadcrumbs that my higher self left when I was young, I had a speech impediment that has its own symbology. It's like I had trouble speaking, you know. Um, and but my sister, she was just a little bit older than me. She could understand what I was saying. So she was a translator between my parents and
Hmm.
me. And I'm seeing the same symbolism in my dreams now. So uh, the more I reflect on my life, the more I realize there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of breadcrumbs, as I call them, that the higher self leaves so that people, uh, when they have these moments of self reflection, they're like, you know what? I think there was deeper meaning behind that. Um, I'm not. I don't think there's a phrase to kind of describe it, but there's a book called Phoenix Rising. Uh, I think the author's Susan Rains or something like that. I forgot the name.
I feel like I've heard of that book. I'm writing it down anyway.
Well, the book kind of talks about the prophets of Noah. She was a Native American woman, and because she was blind, she had to develop her, you know, uh, mental abilities to a greater extent. And uh, the author wrote down the prophet, the things that she was seeing in the future of humanity. And uh, it's interesting that the book was written in the 80s, and even in that book, they talk about biowarfare. And, you know, and so I'm like, there's pages in the book that just kind of summarize her predictions, and almost all of them come to pass in some format. So
Oh,
she also talks about a
she
solar
was a
flare.
prophet.
But one of the key chapters I was referring to was there was a point where the author is asking her, "Why are you telling me all this?
Mhm.
Because why not tell somebody of your own tribe? I'm not a Native American." And she's like, "Oh, but you are." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Don't you remember past life? Reflect back on your life and what happened when you saw how the Native Americans were being depicted in that parade you saw as a child. She was crying. She didn't
Mm.
understand why, because they, you know, in the past, culture wasn't very respectful of Native Americans. They were kind of stereotyped and and so that kind of alerted me. It's like, oh, there's probably my own breadcrumbs throughout the course of my life that uh, I can look at and review for guidance and kind of hints. It's like answering the questions of why am I here? What am I? That reminds me of another interesting tale if you want me to get into that.
Another, yes,
Okay.
tell it.
So I asked myself, what am I? And so I went to work one day and I'm reading Dolores Cannon's book during my lunch break. And the chapter was talking about uh, an angel or a soul that was in the angelic realm and they were having difficulty figuring out where this person should go. Um, so the overall theme was, angels. Uh, and then uh, there was a tweet that day, back when I was on Twitter, um, and there was a channel I was following called Archangel Michael is with you. I came across it and it resonated with me, and I tweeted to somebody, I think about a dream I had, and she commented, um, "What you're describing is very common for incarnated angels symptoms that they feel." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I didn't think much of it." And then I get back from my lunch break, and I tell my coworker with shift change, I'm like, "Oh, I did the maintenance on the instrument," and then she said, "Oh, you're an angel." Never said that again.
There's your answer. There's your
She's
sign.
never
You
said
asked
that
for it.
before, after, and I've done maintenance on the instruments multiple times before. For whatever reason, she decided to say that right then and there. My coworkers have been used as conduits by people on the other side to give answers, more than once. And I'm like, there's no way she knew what I just read in that book, and has no way of knowing I'm on Twitter. There's no way
Yeah.
she planned that or knew that. So I have all
Mm-mm.
these separate sources all coalescing at the same time to give the answer because I just
Hmm.
meditated the day before asking that question. And I said I would appreciate it if I could get a direct answer because I was getting frustrated that I'm getting all these like symbolic answers. And I'm like, oh, there's lack of certainty. So, you know, if a person wasn't looking for it, they wouldn't even make a note of it. They wouldn't even remember it. But because I was looking for it and I was asking questions and specifically when it's an important question about the nature of your being. That's when it seems most likely that you'll get an answer. Sometimes an answer doesn't come right away, depending on the complexity. Sometimes there's prerequisite knowledge, and sometimes it's taken them years to get an answer across. But, I'll remember, you know, I'll have like a flashback. I'm like, I'm in the shower and I'm like, oh, yeah, why am I thinking of that just now? And then, uh, like the last puzzle piece falls into place. I'm like, oh, that's why I'm thinking about this now.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, the shower.
I
That's where all the
love
light
that.
bulbs go off and go.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I just love how that story came together and how you got your answer. I feel it resonates as such truth in my heart. I'm really glad that you came to that conclusion finally and do you feel like you've integrated that information and that you feel that that can be a comforting truth for you?
Well, as a child, I always imagined, I always like idealized, angels, and I thought, oh, uh, you know, if you were an angel on Earth, I guess maybe this is society projecting, but you'd imagine somebody who's holier than thou and is above the rest. And I have not felt like that at all. I've had serious depression the majority of my life, um, suicidal thoughts, not wanting to be here, very negative thoughts. I mean, maybe that makes sense in a certain sense if like my soul comes from these more celestial or angelic realms. Earth is probably a major culture shock. I guess that makes sense on some level. And
Yes.
so maybe it's harder for someone like me to adapt than maybe a lot of others. Maybe that's why I had um, such severe depression. But for me, like as my childhood, it was filled with chronic fear. And then there was an incident where I realized, oh, if I don't speak up, I'm causing problems for others. I was always afraid about causing problems for others. I think it's like baggage from that slave life. Like you don't speak out of turn, otherwise it's a threat on your life. And that fear just, even though we don't remember things from our past lives necessarily, the emotions, strong emotions, will carry over, both
Yeah.
positive and negative. And if you're on Earth, it's most likely going to be a lot of negative. Um, and then, so I was breaking out of my shell, and then um, I was an early bloomer. There was this one girl I liked. Clearly, she liked me. She was very flirtatious. So I worked up the courage, and I remember I'm a guy that had panic attacks from starting a conversation. So it was really tough for me to ask her out. And then, I think it was like 13. A lot, and a lot of people say that's young, and I get that. But at the time, I I I asked her. She said, Sorry, I don't think my father would approve." And I was just absolutely devastated. And for the next 20 years, I was just chronically depressed. And I never really recovered from that. And I've never been in a relationship. It just doesn't work out. I mean, the last attempt that kind of sort of got off the ground, it was right before the pandemic. And I'm not even joking, twice people on the road nearly ran me off the road, and it was only because I was paying attention. Uh, I was able to avoid them crashing into me. So it's like there's all these ill omens. It's like if I was actually get married or something, it's like the earth would blow up or something. I don't know. So I'll just stick with my garden plants. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about your garden. That was one of my big subjects that I wanted to bring up with you.
Is
And
that your next
we do have
question?
a little bit more time. Yeah, I would love to talk about your gardening journey because I think it's really ramped up. From what you've told me, it's really ramped up in the last year or maybe even year and a half. Can you talk about that a little bit and what that's done for you?
So actually this kind of segues nicely with the last conversation. I was dealing with depression, and they say in order to uh, overcome depression, you need a source of love. You need to feel loved. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. And I thought, well, I'm not really good on the dating scene, so that women's kind of seems out. Uh, and then having a pet, have it another live being that can move around, and I have to go to work and I live by myself. If I like cats, but I know he would jump on the counter and get all sorts of trouble and break things, so I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. So then I'm like, well, plants, they don't move. Uh,
It's not very fast.
and I just bought the house, even though people called me crazy back when I bought this house in 2020. Um, it was good timing because there's very little competition, and
Yeah.
prices have gone up quite a lot. So I'm glad
Seems like the timing was actually good.
yeah. So and things just kind of lined up. It was one of those things where, and this is the tangent, but it's a quick one. I'm not joking. There is this mantis hanging on my screen door in my apartment, uh, and I was on the second floor. I don't even know how it got up there. There's nothing on the balcony. There's no food. There's nothing. Why would it was hanging out there? Why am I having all these dreams of mantis? And then I study exopolitics, and it's like, oh, there's these giant mantis beings. They're like system administrators for soul ascension, and I'm like, so, uh, you know, it was probably a sign that I needed to at that time move out of the apartments, and I was like sick of the slow internet there, and um, I had a friend or at work, he would come in and it's like, I thought all the internet in town was bad, and he's like, "No, my internet is pretty good." And it's like, yeah, it depends on where you live in town. It could vary drastically depending if it's like a new development. They'll put down fiber optics, and I'm like, oh, so. And then I looked into. It's kind of hard to look up, but if you just type in an address onto like a web provider, they'll tell you the max speed that you can get. There's no map, so you just have to punch in different addresses. And I realized, oh, if you get a new house, that's where you get the fastest speed. And I'm like, I want faster internet. So
Yeah.
even though things were shutting down, I was like, I gotta get out of here. I had a nice quiet neighbor for many years, and she moved out, and then I had these loud potheads that were like volunteering to hold my packages for me. I'm like, yeah, I need to get out
Oh,
of here. I need to
thanks.
get out of here. So,
Yeah.
uh, and then I had a backyard, and it was a weed patch for the first year, and I was like, I might since I have the backyard, and I live in one of the breadbaskets of the world, the Central Valley of California. I might as well make use of it. Try to grow my own food, and I collect my own rainwater. I try to grow as much food on my own as possible, um, because um, I I think many of us have grown increasingly skeptical of established powers, and we don't trust them anymore. So I don't want them to control my food supply, my water supply, because if they do, they got control over me. So I structured my life to try to be as independent as possible. I use very little electricity off of the grid. I have a lot of solar panels, and I have backup batteries for the house. So there's only usually a couple weeks out of the year in the winter when we don't get much sun and there's a lot of rain and overcast. That's the only time I have to tap into the grid. The rest of the time, I'm generating my own power too. So if uh, things go south, I'll be better off than most. And I feel that I've been guided by my spirit guides to, defend myself. That's been a large theme of a lot of my dreams. Um, it's kind of a whole other topic about the war in the astral realm and the battles I've had to endure and deal with. I have a feeling that once you kind of clear up your own attachments, then you start working, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just a garbage collector trying to clean up the astral realm from the gunk that has been accumulated from the the constant wars, the trauma, the souls that get stuck in the Earth's astral, and then the damage that was done by people during the Atlantean times. Um, all that is like a giant anchor holding people down so that they can't rise up.
So yeah, about the gardening, I know that you are growing a lot of food and that you could probably feed your whole neighborhood. If something goes down, I'm coming over there and I'm bringing my family. We're gonna pitch a tent in your yard. But yeah, I'm interested in your inner expansion with the plants and the gardening.
So, the gardening is one of the few things I would say has been like unequivocally a positive um, for me. Most things, if it's like if there's a positive aspect, it seems like there is always a negative counterbalance to it. Like I reach out to angels, and then I will also get demons, coming out. But with the gardening, um, for me, it's very calming, soothing, especially in spring when everything's growing well. Um, we had a very nice spring this year, so everything was growing well. Um, but now with this heat wave, a lot of stuff is having heat stress and struggling. So
Yeah,
that's a little sad because it's like I can water stuff. I put up sunshades, but it's like apparently I need to do more because
I've lost a lot of plants too. Yeah.
even stone fruits trees, which are usually, pretty robust once they're established, like you could, I have to put up like pop up canopy tents because it's just, um, if it's 110 outside in the shade, it's probably like 160 in the
Yeah.
sun. So those plants are getting literally cooked.
They're
Um,
getting fried. Yeah.
so, you know, some stuff is doing okay. Other stuff, it's like it's clearly taking damage, and that kind of that's hard to watch. But uh, I, I've grown a lot of watermelons. They're my favorite melons, and luckily they grow really easily. Um, I have two orange trees. I planted a nectarine. I got a mango tree, banana tree, multiple cherry tomato plants, passion fruit, avocado, two plum trees, apricot, jujube, uh, lemon, mandarin, loquat, pomegranate. I also got some broccoli, goji
You
berry.
have exotic ones. You have exotic ones that not a lot of people in the Central Valley are growing.
Well,
Honestly, like jujube and passion fruit, I didn't know we could grow those here.
uh, I I go to Lowe's, fairly regularly, and during the summer, sometimes I get one or two unusual plants that you don't normally get, like the passion fruit
Hmm.
or the goji berries. I got lucky on those. I found those two on clearance, $10 a piece, and uh, I, I thought they were just about dead, but those things like they're hardy and uh, uh, even in this heat, they're doing great. Some of the biggest berries I've ever had. And the nice
Wow.
thing
Okay,
about
so did
them,
you have to do a shamanic rain dance or something around them to get them to, to activate or something?
and one of the nice things
Goji
about the
berries, you
goji
said, right?
berries is it's one of the few fruits that have beta carotene. Usually, you have to go to carrots or vegetables.
Yeah.
So, um,
Wow.
uh, it's used in Tibetan medicine, so it comes from that part of the planet, And jujube, I went with that because I tried growing apples, but they kind of prefer a cooler climate, like in Washington. But jujube, uh, it's more common in the Philippines. Some my Filipino workers, they have jujube because they're used to having it in the Philippines. It tastes like an apple. It's just dry, relatively speaking. So a lot of people dry it, and you can kind of use it like dates, where you just use it for sugar. You could do that. I just usually eat them as is with a little water. You could probably uh, make the a close equivalent of applesauce by mixing them in with some water or something. I've never tried that, but you probably could. They have an appley flavor, but they're just dry. Um,
You're making me hungry now.
uh,
Okay, well, I'm really glad that you got into gardening. I mean, it's very inspiring to me. I know we had a long conversation. You gave me a lot of advice. I've done virtually nothing with your advice except still growing sunflowers. I had some health setbacks, so it wasn't like I was just going to be out there with the shovel and really getting my yard ready for that. So I'm hoping for next year. But I'll probably be calling on you a little bit for some advice. I need to set up irrigation. I don't know if I'm going to feed as many people as you, but maybe I could at least feed us.
I have a pretty small yard, but I pack it in. I pack it in. I
Okay.
use every square inch
Okay.
of that sucker. So, like, I have the trees growing, and then I have the watermelons sprawling underneath them. So I'm like
Oh,
doubling up on that on that little piece of
yeah.
land.
Pretty soon you'll be using your roof. Okay, so before I let you go, we just have to chit chat about Star Trek a little bit. I know this is kind of nerdy, but I'm wearing my Captain Picard t-shirt today because I found out that Shaun is a huge Star Trek nerd like me, and I think we both kind of grew up around the Next Generation, and I think we're both the type of person that watches it over and over. Like, I kind of felt weird about doing that because I was like, why do I keep going back to this show that I was literally watching in my teenage years? There are more modern versions of it. Why am I so like emotionally attached to TNG? Like it has to be the next generation. And Patrick Stewart is just like one of my favorite celebrities and speakers. And I just recently listened to his audiobook. Anyway, I just wanted to ask you because I know you're kind of the same way about it. And I haven't been to a convention. I don't know. Have you?
Not a
I
Star
haven't
Trek
gone that
convention, no.
far. Okay. But I was just going to ask you, what's your favorite episode and why?
Uh, it would be the Inner Light. Uh,
Okay.
was that yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have others that are close, but I think the Inner Light it's my all-time favorite, and now there are clear reasons why.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it before.
Well, I
So
mean, it
why do you love
has.
it?
Uh, there's so much. Like every episode has facets of soft disclosure within it with
Yeah.
Next Generation. Um, and if those for those interested, also Stargate SG-1, the first 5 seasons, I was shocked at how many levels of disclosure is in that um, series. And then you read back into how involved the military was. It's like, oh well, somebody had to clear their conscience, but they couldn't come out and just say, oh, this is true. So they had to. You're only allowed to tell the truth in fiction, and you're only allowed to um, say that. What I forgot the expression. You're allowed to tell the truth if you present it as fiction, and you're allowed to present fiction if you present it as truth. That's the world we live in.
Yeah, that
So,
sounds about right.
um, eh, Inner Light, I think, has a lot of universal symbols in it. Even my sister, she's not a Trekkie, but she does remember that episode and she liked it. I mean, the captain, he gets hit with this uh, alien satellite, and he's put into this catatonic state where he lives an entire lifetime in like 20 minutes. So I think many wanderers, maybe all souls here on earth, I'm not sure, are living in a certain similar state. And through
Yeah.
my dreams, I realize once you wake up from the dream, whatever you experience, no matter how long it was, it's very quickly starts to fade away. But and then you start to question, was that even real? But just to make sure that he knew it was real, they left him that flute. And then, even though 20 minutes ago he had never played the flute in his life, and now he was, uh, very proficient in it, proved that he did have this experience. And during that lifetime that he was experiencing the death of his worlds, where their sun is going nova. It's getting active. And you hear people like Corey Good talk about the solar events, or you look back in uh, ancient history and you see these megalithic structures that have severe burn damage, where granite is glassified. That takes temperatures above 2000 degrees centigrade. There's only two things I could think of that could do that. Either massive solar events, and that would tie in with a lot of folklore about people having to live undergrounds, and people who commit crimes and get exiled, the demons, they get sent up to the surface, and then they get burned in the presence of the sun. Vampires, werewolves, all that.
The death of worlds. He was experiencing the dying of their star, basically, their sun.
Yeah. Um, I think that resonates with a lot of people simply by the theme of we're living this other life. Um,
Like the alternate reality that you've
right.
been
And
sort of
when
injected into and then come
and we'll
back.
have a similar experience like Captain Picard, where we'll wake up and it's like, where am I? You're on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
You've been here the last 20. And he's like, what? No, I had a family. I had kids. And it's like, no, you didn't. it, it's like some mornings
Yeah.
when I wake up and I'm like, wait, oh, I'm alive here. Oh, okay. Well,
There's this whole other world that I was just in. Wait, what's this?
it's
Yeah.
funny how,
Um,
like, when your consciousness, it gets synced into whatever it's experiencing. And when you're in that state, that's your world. And things just kind of click in and the knowledge kind of comes in. So you know it's so you think it's believable, and after a certain number of times you start seeing through the veil a little bit and you start to realize, oh, this is all like a simulation. It's
it's
none of
like a
it's real.
gaming platform that you're completely plugged into in your consciousness, and your point of focus is here.
Yeah, I think reality can be defined as just how well your consciousness is synced up to that particular plane of existence that you're experiencing at that moment. So
Ooh. Which reality? Which? Ah, such a trip, but I love, some of the things that you said really kind of expanded my mind in the moment. I'm going to want to go back and watch this again and like fully anchor into that, maybe meditate on it.
um,
This age that we're really anchoring in, well, this is just from my point of view, what I think is going on is we're anchoring in frequencies that change our DNA. We're uploading ourselves into these bodies, and that ascension DNA is changing us from the inside out. And it's changing our reality. It's changing our vibration and the vibration of everything else around us. But that's just my understanding of what's happening with the ascension. And it does correlate with what you're talking about.
though it's always baffled me, like in Dolores Cannon's books, she talks about how there there's uh, it's difficult for people to incarnate here because so many souls want to be on Earth now at this time. And I'm like, Earth is not a fun place. Why would anybody want to be here? And
It's the rebirth of the new Earth, right?
uh, yeah, and I'm like, I mean, I would, to me, it would make logical sense that this sort of awakening process is repeated elsewhere in the galaxy. Like, why would this one be uniquely special? To me, that seems weird. I'm a representative of a particular soul group, and because there's limited spots, they can't all incarnate, so they send a representative. And depending on how the representative does, will determine the direction of the entire group.
That's another conversation too. Yeah. I just want to thank you, Shaun, for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your stored intense dreams and giving us advice on the dream journaling. I know that's going to be helpful to a lot of people. It's already been helpful to me. When you were talking about that, I was getting all kinds of little nudges. And we will continue on with another episode with Shaun. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I don't have a lot of people I can talk about this stuff with, so it's nice to have somebody to share this with.
Well, neither do I, but I have a feeling that the people who are going to be viewing this, that's our tribe right there. They're going to be interested in it too. So, all right. Thank you. We'll sign off for now and see you next time. Bye.